So it's pretty sparse, I mean to say. Yeah, you were here though, so we have a quorum.
Is 3 online?
We're having a special seminar about Srila Prabhupada. So I hope somebody wanders in. Better late than never. So lesson 6 is Varnashrama challenge. Yeah, this is kind of completes lesson 5. Lesson 5 is his kind of branch. Brought us up to the threshold of Varnashrama. Now we're going to dive into Varnashrama. And then tomorrow morning's lesson will be kind of a balance to this lesson. So it's kind of a roller coaster. Okay. Between 1965 and 1977, Srila Prabhupada wrote dozens of books, opened over 100 centers, and initiated thousands of disciples worldwide. By 1977, his non-stop sacrifice had taken its toll on his body. Returning to Vrindavan to continue translating the Bhagavatam into English, Prabhupada said that his days on earth were numbered. When a disciple later asked if His Divine Grace had any regrets, Prabhupada acknowledged he had, quote, one lamentation. First of all, Prabhupada said, no, I have no regrets. And then he considered it again. He said, actually, I have one lamentation. And the disciple who asked the question made a good guess at what that lamentation was. He said, that you have not finished translating the Srimad Bhagavatam, which Prabhupada was doing come hell or high water every night. Prabhupada said, no, that I have not established Varnashrama. And that memory came from Abhiram Prabhu, who was Prabhupada's nurse at the time. And that was the only, there was no recording of that, but that's what Prabhupada said according to Abhiram Prabhu. Where was that sax coming from? Yeah.
The groove, man, from the groove. It's coming from the groove.
The groove? What's that?
The groove.
Groove?
Well, the saxophone's coming from the groove. It's a jazz thing.
Yeah, okay. But I mean, is that what they do every Saturday? They groove? They jam? Okay. Very nice. We just have to separate the mellows. Incompatible mixture of mellows. The timeless culture that shepherds us from the material to the spiritual realm, Varnashrama appears repeatedly in Prabhupada's teachings. Yet His Divine Grace had been so busy spreading the Hare Krishna movement, he scarcely had time to demonstrate Varnashrama's practical application in the modern age. Indeed, only in the last years of his life did he identify Varnashrama's social and spiritual benefits as the key to attracting humanity en masse to Krishna. Maybe we can close the outside door of that door? Or that's where it's, was it from coming from the window?
I think from the
Yeah, just whatever to try to insulate us. Yeah. So, okay, slide 2. Okay, so this is an example of how Prabhupada was talking about the potential of the benefit if we actually adopt Varnashrama culture. Want to come in? We're having a special seminar. We're taking all comers here.
Let's just keep this door open.
Alright, I'm gonna do the saxophone.
All right. Okay. So here's a famous quote. Well, I don't know if it's famous, but it's big. Okay, we're going to have Vishwambhar read the quote.
This is the next aspect of Krishna consciousness which I wish to push forward. On these farms we can demonstrate the full Varnashram system. If these farms become successful, then the whole world will be enveloped by Krishna consciousness. From a letter quoting Srila Prabhupada from his secretary to Hari Das, August 5th, 1977.
Yeah. Harisharpur had just closed on the land at New Govardhan in Australia. Anybody ever been to New Govardhan? It's a great place. It's actually the most advanced rural community I've ever seen in this kind, including the one in Hungary, which is also nice. But Harisharpur had just closed on the land, and he wrote Prabhupada a letter, but Prabhupada was incapacitated. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj, his secretary, read Prabhupada the letter from Harisharpur describing the potential of the land, how you can grow all year round, and so Prabhupada was just in ecstasy hearing about it. And so he just said to Tamal Krishna Maharaj how this is what you just read. But that was what you just read was Tamal putting Prabhupada's response into words, into his words. And I mean, that's huge. If the farms become successful, then the whole world will be enveloped by Krishna consciousness. Wow. This appears in, I think it's in TKG's diary. Pretty sure. Despite the importance Prabhupada gave to Varnashrama, we, his followers, have mostly been slow to embrace this ultimate aspect of his mission. To understand why, we first need to recognize the different ways Prabhupada used the term Varnashrama. So the first half, we're going to look at 4 ways that Prabhupada used the term Varnashrama, and they're really different. And that's one reason why the topic is so confusing, because people tend to just focus on one way Prabhupada used it. All right. Vedic Varnashrama. See if that's all right. According to India's Vedic literature, Krishna consciousness once flourished all over the world, with a culture at once scientific and spiritual. Developing their natural vocations, or varnas, and spiritualizing them in stages, or ashrams, people found harmony and fulfillment working together to please Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now we have another reader. Dr. Krishna.
In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, text 13, Lord Krishna teaches, according to the 3 modes of material nature and the work associated with them, the 4 divisions of human society are created by me.
So that's Prabhupada's translation of the first half of Gita 4.13, and this is my words.
As the parts of the body work together to serve the whole, so in Varna Ashram, 4 broad vocational groups cooperate to serve the social body.
Mm-hmm. Now in Vedic times, thousands of years ago, Vedic times, the support for that cooperation were samskaras, sacred rites of passage through life's major events. Prior to conceiving a child, for example, cultured people meditated on the Supreme, well aware that life comes from life and that the quality of their progeny would reflect the quality of their consciousness, especially at the time of conception. And here's another quote from Prabhupada. This is a morning walk from Prabhupada in Bombay. Quote, that is Vedic civilization, Prabhupada observed. Samskar, before the birth and immediately after the birth. Then, one after another. Marriage is also another samskar. These are Dasha Vida Samskar, 10 purificatory rites. But where is samskar going on today? Nobody takes care of samskar. Still they are declaring that I am Brahman, highborn. Therefore the conclusion is, Kalo Shudra Sambhava. Everyone is lowborn. So that is morning walk, Prabhupada in Bombay. Indeed, the modern chaos reflects the general quality of the world's population. As if born of a bottle of beer on Saturday night. The sacred act that once called souls to enter the world, to revive their love of God, is today routinely reduced to a contact sport, hostile to its natural outcome, conception. Indeed, those who make it into a womb today often don't make it out alive. Hare Krsna told Prabhupada that it's only because his mother's mother, his grandmother, convinced his mother not to abort him, that he was born. And Prabhupada's response was, Acharya? Really? As much as Prabhupada liked to present Krishna consciousness as the positive alternative to modern civilization, he knew the days of classic Vedic Varnashram, quote, the days of yore, he called them, were gone. To spread Krishna consciousness everywhere in modern times would require a special adaptation of Varnashram culture, according to, quote, time, candidate, and country. We're going to take a look at that. Okay, so that's one way Prabhupada would refer to Varnashram, Vedic Varnashram. Days of yore, the good old days. And Brahmins were Brahmins, and Kshatriyas were Kshatriyas. Yeah. Okay, so another way Prabhupada would refer, this is my term, but he would talk about how Varnashram is everywhere anyway in society. You see there's different kinds of people. But it's not organized in devotional service. It's just everybody's disconnected from a culture of devotional service. So everybody's competing for the resources of material nature. So let's look at what I call dormant or latent or potential. I like dormant, sleeping. It's there, it just needs to be awakened, activated. Okay, dormant Varnashrama. Okay, where is Srila Prabhupada?
Red Square.
Red Square. I got to visit Moscow in 2014 and to give this series, and I told my host, Prabhu, you have to take me to Red Square. I want to walk where Prabhupada walked. And so you see Prabhupada, and that was not a color camera, that was a Brownie Star Flash that Shyamsundar had, snuck in his suitcase, and he snuck off a few shots, because they were being tailed by the KGB the whole time. So that's actually a beautiful place. It's reddish, of different red tones, St. Basil's Cathedral. So Prabhupada, he went to Russia. During the Cold War, he was like behind enemy lines, as Shyamsundar put it in one of the Rhino books. He just, you know how he got into Russia? It's fascinating how he even got in.
He was invited?
Yeah, well, sort of. Prabhupada turned it into an invitation. Prabhupada had some correspondence with a Russian professor because, Russia has a long time fascination with Indian culture and philosophy. So Prabhupada was corresponding with Professor Grigory G. Kotovsky at the Institute of Oriental Studies in Moscow. So then, at one point in the correspondence, Kotovsky said, you should come to Moscow and we can have some talks in person. This is so limited, this correspondence. So Prabhupada, as soon as he saw that, Prabhupada being the transcendental opportunist, he showed the letter to Shyamsundar, his secretary, in 71, and he said, so you take this letter down to the Russian embassy in Delhi, because they were in India, and you said, and you say to them, my spiritual master has been invited to the Institute of Oriental Studies by a leading professor, and therefore, because he's invited me, the Russian government should immediately issue a visa for me and you and another American disciple. So Prabhupada and two Americans, during the Cold War, this is like Yoga Maya or something that they did. And they did it. They gave, I mean, it was only for like 5 days or so. It was a short visit, a week. It was a week, yeah, they were allowed. And they were staying at the National Hotel right there in the main drag there by Red Square, and I saw that. Still a dumpy little place. And yeah, so Prabhupada, they got there, and but just before they got on the plane in Delhi, Malati, Shamsundar's wife, slips a Gita into Shamsundar's suitcase. You know, this is like contraband, you know, a Bhagavad Gita, a competing ideology to Soviet communism. This is like a no-no. This could get them thrown in the gulag, you know, for decades, who knows. So, yeah, they get to the airport in Moscow, and they're going through, you know, immigration. And then, because it's two Americans, you know, with Prabhupada, then they open up the suitcases right there, and then there's the Gita. And so immediately, the guy, the inspector, it's like a red flag, and he starts saying in Russian or something, you know, this is not allowed, and I have to, you know, it's like, Prabhupada said later, I thought that I was finished. Oh no, all is finished. And now who knows what's going to happen. Of course he had faith in Krishna, but this is a major, you know, blunder that we try to sneak a Gita in. And so then Prabhupada's insistence, the man, the guy who was all in a huff, you know, the inspector, Prabhupada said, call your supervisor. So then the higher up comes in to see what's going on here, what the problem is. And he takes a look at the Gita, and he's looking at it. And this is that purple Gita, you know, the paperback collar Macmillan for the Black Krishna silhouette. And so he looks at the Gita, just sort of thumbs through it a little bit, and looks at Prabhupada, and says something like, I'm just paraphrasing, oh, he's an old man, he's not going to hurt you. He's not going to hurt us. Little did they know, Prabhupada was to plant the seed for the entire Russian yatra. You know, he met an eager young Russian. So then, you know, put the Gita back in, and then they go in. Yeah. So then they get to Katovsky's door after the Gita in Russian, and at the Institute of Oriental Studies. And, you know, it's one thing to correspond with the Swami from the comfort of your own office, but then when the Swami shows up at your door, you know, right? Even though he had suggested he come, then Katovsky says, oh, come on inside, it's safe in here. In other words, we're not bugged in here. We're not being bugged by the KGB in here, you know. So we know what happened, because Shamsundar, he also snuck in a tape recorder. So the quality of the sound, it's kind of muffled, so I didn't make an audio out of the slide. But the quality of the sound is kind of muffled, but it's audible, you can hear it. And Prabhupada's talking about two things. He's talking about authority, and he's talking about consciousness and matter. And Katovsky wouldn't accept, you know, anything about spirit or consciousness because he was a committed Marxist atheist. And then Prabhupada started talking about Varnashrama. So that's what we're going to tune into here. Who's got the mic? All right. Speaking, okay. Though classic Varnashrama may be gone, its dormant realities endure, awaiting activation. For example, despite utopian attempts to make humanity classless, by nature, classes remain. Speaking with a Russian professor in Moscow during the Soviet era, Prabhupada compared Varnashrama to the sun. Okay, here you go.
So, sunshine is here, in America, in Russia, in India, everywhere. Similarly, this Varnashrama system is prevalent everywhere in some form or other. Just like Brahmins. The Brahmanas mean the most intelligent class of men. Brain of the society. The Kshatriyas, the administrator class, then the Vaishyas, the productive class, and the Shudras, the worker class. These four classes are everywhere present in different names. And because it is created by the original creator,
Creation, because it is creation.
And because it is creation by the original creation, it is prevalent everywhere. Varnashrama.
Mm-hmm. So the professor speaking with Srila Prabhupada was an intellectual, for example. Others in his school were administrators, still others workers, and so on. By divine design, different classes of people exist. Not to exploit, but to cooperate with one another. Oblivious of that design, materialistic classes clash and suffer. The equality we seek fully blossoms in devotional service, where all classes are valued as servants of the Supreme. When these values are forgotten, the Lord's natural Varnashrama order becomes corrupted, as India's history shows. So we're going to take a look at corrupted Varnashrama. All right, next. Vitiated means corrupted.
The vitiated caste system of present India is never sanctioned by the scriptures. But the real caste system is made by God according to quality and work of the subject, and it was never designed for the benefit of accidental birthright. Letter to Dr. Shraddha Patel, 28 February 1949, Calcutta.
Yeah, I mean we are typecast, but not by birth, but by the modes, guna and karma. But we can also transcend that modal typecasting through another kind of Varnashrama. Okay, so it's ruined India, the caste by birth philosophy. So let's look at an example of an unqualified, even farcical Brahmin. He was the best I could find on Google Images to represent a farcical Brahmin. Farcical Brahmins claiming power and privilege based on birth have obscured the truth and beauty of India's original Varnashrama culture. Though typecast by the nature we acquire at birth, by engaging in devotional service, we can rise above nature's modes to realize our spiritual potential by cooperatively serving the Lord. And here's a Western corrupt so-called Brahmin. Lacking loving service. This is supposed to be depicting, has anybody ever heard it's called prosperity theology? You heard this? Okay, it's the idea pushed by a lot of evangelists, heads of big mega churches who require lots of donations from wealthy donors. So the preaching by the so-called preachers is that God wants you to be rich. And if you're rich, that's a sign of God's favor, right? And then if you're rich, you can also donate to the church. Lacking loving service, too often we compete and bargain with one another. Treat God like Santa Claus, the great order supplier, and run a prosperity race to heaven. East or West, such materialistic religion wearies us as it wearies God. It's love we're all after, intimate exchanges of selfless service, which is the spirit of divine Varnashrama culture. So this is what kind of Varnashrama that Prabhupada is interested in. Okay. Slide. Yes. Okay, this is called Divine Varnashram for Modern Times. Varnashram that elevates us from material to spiritual consciousness is called Daiva, or divine. Prabhupada's Divine Varnashram for Modern Times has 4 essential features, and I'm just presenting them visually, so there's not going to be any reading. So the first feature is, and there's that's the first visual. Pure devotional service to Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as the goal of life. You can have materialistic varnashram and just try to make a cozy, happy little life in this world. But then there's no ultimate benefit because you stay in the cycle of birth and death. Like people like Ravana and Duryodhana, they knew a lot of principles of management. They knew how to do things in the world, but they weren't. They were demoniac because they weren't all about devotional service to Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Daiva Varnashram has Krishna as the target. And the second one is local land and cow economics as the model for sustainable living. This is the Gandhi that Prabhupada liked was Swadeshi. One of Gandhi's things was producing everything you need. Gandhi was famous for spinning his own cloth and growing the food. And he had I forget the name of this place. Anybody remember Gandhi's? It's in Gujarat somewhere, I think.
Porbandar.
What is it?
Porbandar.
Porbandar.
Porbandar?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sabarmati Ashram.
Gotcha. Thank you. Okay, so local land and cow economics is the model for sustainable living. And another feature of Daiva Varnashram is, look. Now this is a visual of the castle, but I pretended it was a college. Because it's sort of a fancier look than the college. So that's another feature is Varnashram colleges for vocational and spiritual retraining. In Vedic Varnashram, there's no need for Varnashram colleges because it's just passed down. It's in the culture. There's lines of purebred Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas like that, and it's just taught. But it's all lost in Kali Yuga, so there's a need for spiritual and vocational retraining. And finally, 4, the introduction of Daiva Varnashram principles according to time, candidate, and country. And if you want to read about this, I have a reference for you. If you want to read about how to apply Krishna consciousness according to time, candidate, and country, my favorite reference is CC Madhya 23.105 purport. And then there's another one too. Bhagavatam 4.854 purport. It's really, you see how Prabhupada spread it all over the world. The way you do it in India is not the way you do it, say, in America or Belgium or South America. Every place has got a different flavor. And you have to know how to make it accessible and relevant according to time, candidate, country. The principles are the same, but the application of the principles, which is crucial, are very different. I'm going to take a look at that too, by the way, in lesson 8. Borrowing a phrase from the British poet Wordsworth, because Prabhupada was educated at Scottish Church College, and he had Scottish fathers, and they were studying British writers, poets. Borrowing a phrase from the British poet Wordsworth, Prabhupada sometimes described Daiva Varnashram as, quote, plain living and high thinking. That was the way Wordsworth started a poem in 1803. Plain living and high thinking are no more. 1803. I mean, if Wordsworth, you couldn't even imagine what's going on today. He was lamenting the industrial revolutions that were going on in Europe and how they were dragging people away from the cities, or away from the land, and getting them in these congested cities full of crime and disease and slaving away in factories. And so plain living and high thinking are no more. When Krishna descended to earth, he himself lived this way in plain living and high thinking. In the rural village of Vrindavan as a boy, and later in clean and green, that's my phrase, Dwarka city as a youthful prince. If we could show the world a better way to live, Prabhupada reasoned, everyone would eventually take the Daiva Varnashram journey home. It's one thing to distribute books, but it's quite another thing to demonstrate the life we describe in the books. We say in America, don't tell me, show me. Then I might read this book. Otherwise, I might just think it's something that was going on 5,000 years ago, or some fairy tale. Prabhupada's vision was the fruit of a lifetime of preaching. Let's look at how our founder Acharya's application of Varnashram to ISKCON evolved over time. So that to make it even more challenging, Prabhupada actually applied the concept of Varnashram to ISKCON very differently over 3 time periods. So he used the term 4 different ways, and then he applied it to ISKCON, just in general, the term Varnashram, 3 different ways. And the first way is rather astonishing. Whoa, forget it. Okay, where's the... Okay, just read that.
1966, 1973, forget Varnashram.
I mean, that's the majority of Prabhupada's preaching years. 65 or 66, 65, 66 to 77. So for more than half of those years, Prabhupada, forget it. From 1966 to 1973, the majority of his preaching years, Srila Prabhupada often dismissed Varnashram as impractical. Here's an example from 1968 answer to a question in Bhagavad Gita class in LA. Read that.
Therefore, this is the panacea to engage everyone in Krishna consciousness, chanting Hare Krishna. This is the only remedy. Now you cannot again introduce the system of Varnashram.
Yes. Forget it. Just have festivals, distribute books, chant Hare Krishna, distribute prasadam, and in this way. Because Prabhupada's, I'll just keep going here. While he was launching ISKCON, Prabhupada's priority was to put a head back on society. He was trying to first focus on the Brahman component. And here's a quote from Prabhupada. Prabhupada is such a straight shooter. Quote, at the present moment the society is headless, a dead body, or head cracked, crazy. Prabhupada just tells it as it is, right? Head cracked, crazy. There is head, nonsense head. What is the use of nonsense head? Therefore there is a great necessity of creating a class who will act as brain and head. That is Krishna consciousness movement. And what did he have to work with? Recovering hippies. He was trying to make us the head. And we were still, suffering from, we put too much stuff in our own head. Feed your head. Okay, that was a July 4th, 1970, San Francisco. Since Brahmins are the head of a Varnashrama social body, as much as possible, Prabhupada was engaging his disciples in Brahminical activities, chanting Hare Krishna, worshipping in the temple, studying and distributing his books, staging spiritual festivals, and so on. Still, Prabhupada wanted to give Krishna consciousness to everyone, including people who would not chant. Soon, Krishna would set the world stage to help make Varnashrama culture more accessible and urgent, starting with Prabhupada's own followers. So some world events happened that gave Prabhupada a reason to move beyond and forget Varnashrama. That was his initial approach. Just forget it, just chant Hare Krishna, just do Brahminical stuff, we're going to be Brahmin. So here's what happened. In 1973, was anybody here born after, you're all born after 1973? Oh, okay, good. I was in the movement, yeah, and here's what happened. In 1973, owing to artificial, let's see, yeah. Owing to artificial manipulation of the oil supply in the Middle East, the modern world experienced a, quote, energy crisis. Anybody ever heard of that historically? Is it in the OPEC countries in the Middle East, they were restricting the supply of oil. And therefore, it was jacking up the fuel prices, and there wasn't enough, petrol for the people, for their cars. High fuel prices, long fuel lines, and violence dramatize the folly of a civilization that runs on harmful fossil fuels. I mean, in America, people were shooting each other at the petrol station. Because, if somebody cut in a line to try to make sure they got some gasoline ahead of you, somebody, Americans, there's so many guns, somebody would take out a gun and shoot somebody. You can't do that. Crazy. Amidst the angst, Srila Prabhupada saw an opportunity. Walking and talking with leading disciples the following spring, Prabhupada noted that if we could show the public a better way to live, they would be more inclined to listen to Krishna. From 74 to 76, the world needs Varnashrama. This is during one of the morning walks. I'm not sure if it's Vrindavan or Mayapur. I think Vrindavan. There's a young Hridayananda, Bhagavan, Prabhupada, there's a young Hansa Buddha. So Prabhupada has, for years, had been saying, forget Varnashrama. So now all of a sudden he's talking about how we need it. And so they're looking at him like, huh? Quote, here's a quote from the walk in Vrindavan. Because if the people are in chaos, how they will be able to accept the great philosophy? It requires a cool brain. They can't even read these books. They're too agitated. Indeed, I write, a brain nourished by fresh milk from protected cows, Prabhupada wrote, quote, can assimilate the subtle form of spiritual knowledge. That's from Light of the Bhagavad. To show the world a better way to live, Prabhupada's followers would have to learn and teach the fundamentals of Varnashrama culture. Okay, so here's the standing order we haven't fulfilled for 50 years. Who's got the mic? Okay. What's your name? Jyotia?
Dorothea.
Dorothea.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, Dorothea, read this.
Yes.
You have to press it. Turn it off.
Turn off the yellow. Turn off the yellow. Yep, now you're good.
The Varnashrama college has to be established immediately. Everywhere, wherever we have got our center, a Varnashrama college should be established.
So there's the city temples, and then Prabhupada, once people were trained, got basic training in how to be a devotee in the temples, then he wanted them to graduate to the Varnashrama college to start specializing in what their natural interest was. And then if they liked, they could stay at the college and train others, or they could graduate into the Varnashrama village. That's the next where you could demonstrate plain living and high thinking. Yeah, and then Prabhupada also had another element in this constellation of initiatives. He liked, in college towns, he liked a restaurant to be in the college town with a reading room for the students. Restaurants and reading rooms. That's what we have going on in Tucson, actually. It's pretty effective. It's good. The devotees were astonished. You can see it on their faces there. Why was Prabhupada reversing his attitude toward Varnashrama? But as they continued to walk with him, they began to understand this new direction as an extension of his compassion. Prabhupada, quote, devotee, personally, he has no problem, but he pushes himself in this degraded society to teach how to live, how to become gentlemen. Otherwise, we have no business. But if we don't give them the opportunity, they'll not be able to come to Krishna consciousness. Yeah. So he's saying, look, we need to show the world a better way to live. And first of all, we have to understand how to live ourselves in Varnashrama. So let's study this and just open up the Varnashrama college. And we can, when we understand it enough, then we can start teaching it to others, how the spiritual culture works. And then we can graduate to the Varnashrama village, the Vedic village. It's different. Or you can stay in the city temples. City temples. I mean, you folks here, you're in the country, but city temples I liken to emergency shelters, like where the first responders live in a catastrophe. You know, because the cities are always, there's always some crime, or it's not a happy place. These cities. Okay, but then when the city temples receive people, as I said, they show training. If they're really interested in what we're doing, then they have to show the people a better way to live. So that's where Varnashrama comes in. Since devotees are already with Krishna, Prabhupada continued, they don't need Varnashrama. At this point. We're devotees. So we don't need this for ourselves, but they need it. They need a way to be inspired to come out of the material world and go to the spiritual world. They need that bridge, right? So, but the world needs Varnashrama, Prabhupada said, to learn how to live and come to Krishna. Now, it wasn't long before Prabhupada would further extend his compassion by telling the devotees how much they too needed Varnashrama, humanity's, quote, stepping stone for spiritual understanding. That's from the purport, Gita 231. So here's the third phase. It's just 1 year, 1977. And specifically, there's one famous conversation. Do you have this Valentine's Day here in Belgium? Yeah. Yeah, okay, we have it in America too. So on February 14, 1977, those of us in Varnashrama research, we call this Prabhupada's Varnashrama Valentine to ISKCON's members. They have the database. You go in there and you go to conversations, and you go into February 14, you go to 77, you go to February, and you go to February 14. You see there's two conversations that day. You go to the one labeled Varnashrama must be implemented in ISKCON. On February 14, 1977, in his quarters in Mayapur, India, Srila Prabhupada reminded the devotees devotees how important it was for them to inspire and educate people by following Varnashrama principles. When a disciple pointed out that Lord Chaitanya dismissed Varnashrama as external, Eho Bahira, Mahaprabhu said to Ramananda Roy, it's external. Prabhupada replied, quote, our program is different. And the devotees said, what? Right? But Prabhupada, you're the greatest representative of Lord Chaitanya. What does Prabhupada mean? Our program is different than Lord Chaitanya's? Well, think about it. Lord Chaitanya, in that conversation with Ramananda Roy, he wanted to taste Mahabhav, because he's Krishna coming in the mood of Radha. So he wants, it's not that he rejected it out completely, but he just wanted, in that case, Ramananda to go to some higher topics. But Varnashrama is the bridge from the material to the spiritual world. And then Prabhupada says, our position is different. Our duty is that we shall arrange the external affairs also nicely, that one day they will come to the spiritual platform very easily, paving the way. So he's still saying they. But now, when another disciple wondered why devotees who were already on the spiritual platform, beyond the designations of Varna and Ashram, should follow Varnashram principles, Prabhupada challenged his assumption. This was Suresvara Maharaj. Or maybe Hare also. It was Prabhupada, Hare Krsna, and Suresvara Maharaj. Prabhupada challenged his assumption. So we need Varnashram, and then where's the mic? Okay, Mandali's going to read.
Varnashram should be established to become Vaishnava. It is not so easy to become Vaishnava. If a Vaishnava, to become Vaishnava is so easy, why so many fall down? It is not easy to become Vaishnava.
So the assumption was that we're Vaishnavas. We don't need, Prabhupada says, really? You're Vaishnavas? My trusted leaders are sometimes leaving, or they're falling down. You know, they can't even continue following the principles. Because Prabhupada had us all, for so many years, in emergency mode. This is an emergency. We have to spread this everywhere at once as fast as possible. And he did, but there were a lot of casualties. So Prabhupada knows that for the long run, for some, just by observing his own sold out disciples, but who were having a hard time, if they couldn't even make it, then we need to engage people more according to their own natures. Yeah. There's only so long you can be in emergency mode. It's always urgent, but you can't just be in emergency mode all the time. So if you look at Gita 247, Prabhupada talks about three kinds of duties in the purport too. You have a right, the verse is, you have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you're not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself to be the results of the fruits of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duties. So Prabhupada focuses on three kinds of duties in the purport. There's routine work, there's things we all have to do. We have to get up, we have to bathe, and we have to eat, there's things we have to do. And then there's emergency work, like if there was a fire here right now, we'd all really cooperate really fast, no matter what our Varna and Ashram, whatever it is, to put it out. And then there's, Prabhupada said, desired activities. There's things that by our nature, we're just meant to do. That's how Krishna designed it. We're all different materially, so we can help each other and make a complete society. So, to become a Vaishnava, if it's so easy, why so many fall down? It's not so easy to become a Vaishnava. So the way to become a Vaishnava is called Praya Vaishnava, aspiring Vaishnava, is to get aboard Krishna consciousness in the Varnashram way. Like when I joined the movement in 1970, it was sink or swim. There was no bhakti program or introductory or, it was just like, All right. Good luck. Yeah. The longer Prabhupada preached in the worldwide Hare Krishna, the longer Prabhupada preached in the world, the more he saw how even his own followers would need the Varnashrama bridge to come to Krishna. As his life on earth was drawing to a close, Prabhupada knew that building the bridge, a bridge the whole world could cross, would be a great challenge. Therefore, his Varnashrama challenge. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. So we're coming to the end, and then we're going to do. You can. Is everybody taking a turn? Oh, Prabhu hasn't. You do that? No. Okay. So here we go. His Varnashrama challenge. This is the title of the lesson. Let's just put Prabhupada up there. There's Prabhupada the manner again. In lesson 5, we saw how Srila Prabhupada expanded the Hare Krishna movement in phases. Whereas earlier phases focused on brahminical concerns and activities, holy names and holy books, temples and deity worship, initiation and convocation, the ultimate Varnashrama phase invites everyone to help build a spiritual society, not just, very advanced people or brahminical people. So, and Krishna does this in the Gita too. Krishna is very inclusive in the 12th chapter. You know those famous, if you can't do this, do this. If you can't do this, do this. So in the Bhagavad Gita, it's called Devotional Service, chapter 12, in text 8 through 10, Lord Krishna offers progressively accessible advice. So in text 8 he says, just fix your mind on me. What's the problem? Well, we know the problem. Our mind is, as soon as we sit down to chant Hare Krishna, our mind is off to the races. And the mind wants to go to the movies and it just wants to think about everything but Krishna's names. So we always have to bring it back, as Krishna says in the Gita, right? But in text 8, he says, just fix your mind on me. And pure devotees can do that. They're absorbed in Krishna's name, form, qualities, pastimes. Just fix your mind on me, he advises the advanced listener. For the less advanced, the Lord then recommends the disciplines of Bhakti Yoga. If you can't fix your mind on me without deviation, then follow the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga. Well, that's what we're practicing sadhana bhakti, devotional service and practice. In this way, we'll develop a desire to attain me, because Krishna praying is really in there. It just has to be invoked, has to be restored. So sadhana and bhakti are scientific spiritual processes to invoke our natural love for Krishna. So that's text 9. Text 10, Krishna extends himself even further. And for those not ready to follow strict vows, which is going to be most of the world, in text 10, Krishna recommends working for him. Remember that verse? If you can't follow the rules and regulations of Bhakti Yoga, then just try to work for me. Because by working for me, you will come to the perfect stage. And his commentary to that text, Prabhupada reaches out to all kinds of readers. Let's see who he reaches out to. Who's got that? All right, Prabhupada.
There are many devotees who are engaged in the propagation of Krishna consciousness, and they require help. So, even if one cannot directly practice the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga, he can try to help such work. Every endeavor requires land, capital, organization, and labor.
Okay, before you read any further, land, capital, organization, and he's reaching out here to Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra types, spirits. You're going to see how Prabhupada uses spirit in a psychophysical way in a future lesson. Yeah, he's reaching out to everybody. Okay, go ahead.
This voluntary service to the cause of Krishna consciousness will help one to rise to a higher state of love of God, whereupon one becomes perfect.
Wow. Well, that's really going for everybody here. And everybody's welcome to get aboard. And in that kind of inclusive mood, everybody can make advancement. Because most people, they just won't be ready to make those vows and for rounds or principles. But they know Krishna consciousness is right. They've read enough, they've seen enough, they've been around devotees. They want to help. So land, capital, organization, and labor. And maybe they've got some Shaktis, they've got some adhikar that will give service to the movement. Oh, okay, good. Sometimes conversations are going on inside the class. Since most people live in or near cities, for example, it is natural to engage them in building temples to attract everyone to Krishna. At the same time, the modern urge to live a simpler, more natural way of life will find fulfillment the more devotees engage people in building rural communities for living the way Krishna lives. Let's see here. All right. Oh. Okay, not quite yet. Living the way Krishna lives. Where are we? Here we go. Well, I think I have another slide. I need to put a slide. I have a, yeah. Oh, okay, no, here it is. Go ahead, we'll read that.
So this Krishna consciousness movement is trying to revive village organization. As you are trying here, Krishna in his natural life is a village boy in Vrindavan. Vrindavan is a village. But it does not mean that we shall avoid city life or town life. No. Everything, every place is Krishna's place. Everywhere there should be Krishna consciousness.
That was during Prabhupada's one and only visit to one of my alma maters. I lived in Radhadesh, but I wasn't there when he gave that. 15 July 76. Varnashrama village includes the spiritual vision to solve our modern ecological problems. So to come full circle, I'm going to read, this is a quote again.
This is the next aspect of Krishna consciousness which I wish to push forward. On these farms we can demonstrate the full Varnashrama system. If these farms become successful, then the whole world will be enveloped by Krishna consciousness.
Unquote. That's that letter that Tamal sent to Acharya. By the way, on the left is my late godbrother Paramananda Prabhu and Gita Nagari holding some brown Swiss oxen. And then there's a lady, I'm not sure where she's from. Anybody know? She from here?
No.
I see some nice, do you engage woofers here? Oh, okay, that's who's picking and planting. Yeah, it's nice. And since the Varnashrama College would research and manifest the blueprints for that village, we have lots of catching up to do to meet Srila Prabhupada's Varnashrama challenge. Town or country, reviving divine Varnashrama culture will illumine our natural place in Krishna's world. And by appreciating one another as his eternal servants, we will find the freedom, equality, and happiness we seek in this life and the next. Okay, so we're going to go to, we got about 20 minutes or so for Q&A. We're going to go to the lesson, learning outcomes.
Lesson 6. is Varnashrama challenge learning outcomes. By now, we should be able to explain why Srila Prabhupada, one lamentation before leaving the world was that he hadn't established Varnashrama. Compare the 4 Varnas to 4 parts of the human body. Explain the term Vedic Varnashrama. Explain the term dormant Varnashrama. Identify symptoms of materialistic Varnashrama. Identify 4 features of Prabhupada's divine Varnashrama. Describe Prabhupada's application of Varnashrama to ISKCON over 3 time periods. Explain why, if establishing Varnashrama was Prabhupada's ultimate strategy for spreading Krishna consciousness worldwide, we have been slow to take up the challenge.
Slow isn't the word. 1974, that's when Prabhupada dropped the Varnashrama College bomb. Here it is, 2024, and we're like, really? This is called Manda Sumanda Mateo, slow and bad. Symptoms of Kali Yuga. Okay, in terms of those learning outcomes, can you make some questions or comments?
Yeah, I'm still not clear on what this Varnashrama college exactly is. Like, for instance, like you could teach Kshatriyas. Now, I could teach a few things. I know some martial arts. I know some yoga. But the real Kshatriyas, it's like the form of Legion Soul, the Legion. What is it called?
French Foreign Legion.
French Foreign Legion. Those are real Kshatriyas. Or the American Army. You're from America, the most powerful army in the world. What we're going to teach them? You've got tanks. You've got Ukraine. It takes like 5 months to understand the tank.
Right. Yeah, well, Prabhupada did say different things about that. But, that's why in Vedic times, remember, it's not Vedic Varnashrama, it's Daiva Varnashrama for the modern age. So, Prabhupada made the point that, because many things were discussed on those walks about the Varnashrama college. And, so it's especially, and then when the devotees saw that Prabhupada was serious, that he wasn't just, trying to bewilder them or something, they started to get into it. So what will we teach, in the Varnashrama college, Prabhupada? So Prabhupada made it clear, we're going to teach what the 4 Varnas, the duties of the 4 Varnas are. Prabhupada said, first Varna, then Ashram. First you have to know who you are. That's the next lesson. Finding our mission in his mission, which is no small thing in Kali Yuga. We tend to be mixed bag of tricks. So first Varna, then Ashram. And then so Prabhupada was clear also that it's not that you, as devotees, need to teach everything, but you can engage people to teach. For example, we're talking about, I put local land in cow economics. Well, half the cows produced on average, depends on how you breed, but are male cows are bulls. So they have no use in a slaughterhouse society except to be sold for slaughter, either at 6 months as veal, tender veal, or 2 years for steer beef, tenderloin, steak and all this stuff, horrible stuff. But if you turn the bull into an ox, there is a process. I don't know if you do it here, but then that same energy that the male cow or the bull or the bullocks, as Prabhupada would say in India, they say bullocks, would put into procreation, because bulls are very passionate, they put into work. Their shoulders develop more, their this part. And they just like horses like to run, and deer like to prance, you know. The bulls like to pull, they like to work out, you know. So, and there are still places where working draft animals, and I'm speaking for America now, it is taught. And you can engage those kinds of people to teach as, what do they call them, adjuncts, when you bring in somebody who has expertise in his field, who doesn't necessarily have the masters or the PhDs, but they're expert. You can bring them in. And of course, they have to be vetted, they have to be sympathetic to the kind of values that we're trying to present. So the context is in terms of, see, Prabhupada, he's actually meant to re-spiritualize the whole society. You mentioned the American military, or the Israeli military, or the Russian. Well, this is, how does Prabhupada begin the Krishna book? Once upon a time, when the world was overrun by the unnecessary defense force of demoniac kings who were posing as leaders, who were actually demons. So Prabhupada is really just going for the whole re-spiritualization of human society. And it starts with putting a head back in society, with people who know, who have an understanding of what life is about. It's not just meant for sense gratification, to produce people as if, as I said, you know, from a bottle of beer on Saturday night. You know, people get intoxicated, they have illicit sex, and out comes some import from the lower regions of the universe, you know. No wonder the world's crazy, because everybody is being produced of demoniac consciousness, I mean, by and large. So, yeah, to answer your question, you have to really zoom back and get an overview of what Prabhupada's trying to do here. He's not talking about what can we teach the American military. No, he's talking about re-spiritualizing. That's what the Bhagavatam is in 1.5.11. You know, Tad Bhagav Visargo Danatav. He's trying to revive spiritual values, as Narada Muni told Vyasa. Yeah. Now, how to do that? We haven't done it yet. And when Prabhupada was in Vrindavan, and when he said, I had one lamentation, he actually tried to go. That was in August 77. Then he actually tried to go, as you know. If you know Prabhupada's Leela, in beginning of September, with practically no body left. You know, they carried him on the plane, and his destination was Gitanagari. Why? I want to sit down and show you how to live in Varnashrama. He never got to do that. But the good news is, he described it all in his vast Vani. It's one of the things he talked about more than anything else. So to understand how to make Varnashram colleges, we have to excavate those instructions from that Vani. And I could take up the rest of the time describing this, but somehow or other, I was the one the GBC asked in 1992 to do that. Why? Because I was living in Gitanagari and I was writing articles for Back to Godhead, plain living and high thinking. I mean, I don't know if you've read old BTGs, but I'm there in a much younger edition. I had my photograph, you know, it was like a 36-year-old edition of, I mean, I'm more than twice that age, my body now, so. And so I was writing pieces on how we're milking the cows and then working the bulls and making, what is it, drying our own food and canning it and trying to, you know, living in the lap of material nature, as Prabhupada said, and depending on Krishna. He didn't talk about self-sufficiency so much as living in the lap of material nature and depending on Krishna. Here's another example. We have we were living in Amish country, and a lot of Mennonites were there too. So there was a lady, a Mennonite lady called Evelyn Snook, and she was an herbalist. Is that your name? Snook. Snook, yeah. Okay. So she was an herbalist, and we used to go to her, because whenever the boys got sick, we used to go to the Amish midwives to deliver our babies, because they were expert midwives. And we used to go to Evelyn, for cleansing or healing or that kind of thing. And so I said to Evelyn, one day I said, Evelyn, why don't you come out to our farm and show us, we're about 350 acres, but we're all kind of refugees from the cities and the suburbs. We don't know this stuff. We don't know what we have. And I'm sure there's so much you can show us on our property where we wouldn't have to go to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania every week and, buy so much stuff. It's probably right. We're probably living amidst it. So she did come out and she walked us around the property and she said, okay, so this is edible and this is your cosmetic and this is your medicine. And then at the end she said, you people are living in a paradise. You just don't know it. So that's the kind of people we could engage in the Varnashrama College. To show people where they are, everywhere, wherever we have got our center. So we could show people how to live. If we had not only the college, but then we had the community not far away in the country, outside the city, to apply it. So that's really what Prabhupada wanted us to do. When I was living in New Vrindavan in 1971, we didn't know what we were doing, really. But we had some cows, and we knew a little bit, but not so much. And so we were writing Prabhupada questions about planting the crops, gardening and planting crops for cows. And so Prabhupada wrote back to us and he said, why are you asking me these things? Ask a local farmer. They live on the land, they live on this land where you are, they know what grows and what works. Now Prabhupada's talking about ask a local farmer, that means a local farmer who's selling his cows to slaughter. But they also knew the land. So, amedyada pikanchana, you can take gold even from a filthy place. It's a slaughterhouse guy, but he knows the land. So Prabhupada's telling us to ask him. Yeah. So it's not that we have to know it all or do it all ourselves, but we have to know, we have to start developing networks of favorable people who can teach these skills in the different varnas and ashrams in the Varnashrama College. Yes, Prabhu? Oh, that's when.
That's good.
Okay, give it to him.
Quite often we get a criticism that we have a very high philosophy, but we don't really live according to it.
Well,
there's a very big gap of
sure.
what we preach and how we do practice it ourselves. And so, for example, Varnashram, we have brahmacharis, vanaprasthas, sannyasis, grihasthas. But although we call grihasthas or brahmachari or vanaprastha sannyas, all these rules that go along with those ashramas, we don't really follow them to the exact. We should.
To what? I mean, a Vedic standard?
Well, which standard we should have according to.
Prabhupada is not interested in Vedic, he's interested in Vaishnava. So there's a big difference. That's why he said forget Vedic. He's not interested in turning back the clock to 5,000 years ago, the way it was in India 5,000 years ago. He wants to, so he's interested in applying Varnashrama principles practically according to time, country, and candidate. Again, the way you do it in Indonesia, in Bali, Indonesia, is a lot different than the way you're going to do it in Los Angeles, California. So
could you give an example? For example, a sannyasi in Vedic time and a sannyasi in ISKCON. What is the difference according to
Yeah, well, in Prabhupada's ISKCON Sangha, Prabhupada's emphasis is in outreach. So, if somebody in Vedic times was a sannyasi, I mean, how do people get around in Vedic times? They walked. So there wasn't like international, there weren't jet age swamis. Prabhupada was a jet age swami, and also our sannyasis often jet around. But it was different. Prabhupada really does want to move toward more local living like that. So we need more gurus, we need more swamis, we need more national colleges, and the day may come, as Prabhupada told us, when there will be no more motor car civilization. So it's not sustainable what's going on. That's why the world gets crazier, crazier, and crazier, because everybody is frantically competing for the dwindling clean water. They want cheap fuel, wine for profit. And meanwhile, we're killing ourselves, literally, because the climate is changing. Yeah. So it's not sustainable, so Prabhupada knew that, and we know it theoretically, but we're still kind of, suffering from the Preya mentality, the instant gratification mentality. We don't think so much for the long term. I'll give you an example of how an Amish friend of mine captured our dilemma. We had a lot of Amish friends at Gita and I still do. And so his name was Solly Wingard. Is your name Wingard too? Pennsylvania Dutch. Sally Wingard. So Solly supported himself by making and selling blankets. That was a typical, simple living, livelihood. So he was fascinated by us. So he said, "Hey, Rich, let me get this straight. So you guys, you came from the cities and the suburbs in this life. He knew we were all converts. We didn't come to Krishna consciousness later. So he said, so you started with cars and sports cars and all this stuff, and now you're trying to go to oxen? I mean, that's even radical for them because the Amish work horses, and horses are very passionate. And you can plow more with a horse faster, but they're more temperamental, and they're not into the cow protection thing because they eat meat, most of them. So that's like they got the plain living down in the sense that if your house burns down today in an Amish community, in 2-3 weeks you'll have a new house. So they'll build you a new one. They don't need social security. They don't need social welfare networks. They just take care of each other. They got their own medicine. They got their own school system. They got their own transportation on the horse and buggy. And they're in America because they got chased out of Europe. They didn't cooperate with the Industrial Revolution that Wordsworth was lamenting. They kept refusing to leave the land and go into the cities and pay taxes and all this stuff. So they just, till finally, when America started, they went to America. And they first started right where, near Gita, Pennsylvania, that's where Gita is a state called Pennsylvania, Penn's Woods, freedom of religion. So they settled in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and then they spread out, and a lot of them were right in Juniata County, where Gita is in Pennsylvania. So you're trying to go to Oxford. So he's, and truth be told, in the 80s we tried, but we kind of fell on our face, because in 83, for example, we got an award by the Pennsylvania Dairymen's Herd Improvement Association, they gave us an award because these are the guys that go around and check on all the herds of cows in the state, whether it's Holstein or Brown Swiss or Guernsey or whatever. And they keep track of your how sanitary you are, and also your total milk output and your butterfat content. So in the Brown Swiss category, we came out number 1. And so they informed us, you must come to our awards banquet in January 1983 and to receive your award. So we went. Dhotis, shaved heads, tilak. We brought our milk, our butter, our cheese, our milk sweets, our ice cream, homemade right from the cow, protected cows. And, the other farmers who came to accept their awards, they came in their Sunday best, their overalls with the suspenders. I mean, these wizened, grizzly farmers who were in cahoots with the slaughterhouse. And so all they could say was, how do you make it? How do you support? How do you make it? You don't sell your cows to slaughter?
Yeah.
You don't sell your bulls to slaughter right away, When the milk production of the female cow, the cow drops, you don't. Yeah, you don't sell her to slaughter? How do you make it? How do you pay the bills? So we gave them a classic Vedic answer. We didn't tell them the whole truth, but we gave them this answer. When you treat the cow like your mother, think about it. Your mother nurses you, but then for most of your life, you get the milk from the cow. So when you treat your cow like your mother, she gives more milk, she's happier, she gives richer milk, and then when you don't kill the male bull, if you just work him, if you turn him into an ox and you train him, he's very valuable. You don't need to buy tractors and go into debt. And a lot of farmers commit suicide because they can't pay their debts. So the cow's your mother, the bull's your father. Really, really simple. That's why we got the award. And they couldn't argue with success. We got the award, but they just kept saying, how do you make it? What we didn't tell them was that to pay the bills and support, our habit of going into Harrisburg once a week to buy all the things we weren't making, we were running $1 million oil painting business. So really, what we showed in the 80s was inspiring to write about for BTG, but it was a very expensive hobby. Real Varnashrama is not communal. Nobody owns anything. It's community. But that's going to take time to develop. And you can't do it alone. They're right. You can't do it just an ISKCON farm, Eden outbreak alone. You have to do it with others to make it work. Okay, it is 7:01. There's so many things we can talk about. Is anybody dying to ask a question? But let me just read you the transition. Did you have a question, by the way? Oh, okay. Transition. Having beheld the revolutionary scope of our founder Acharya's mission, in the next lesson we'll focus on finding our individual mission within his greater mission to re-spiritualize humanity, because sometimes from experiencing his Varnashrama challenge, people are freaked out. Oh no, that means we're going to just drop everything and run out into the country. I mean, here you are, you're already in the country. And forget about the city. No, please, everybody has a place in Prabhupada's challenge. City temples are very much needed. That's where the people are. But we need Varnashrama colleges, we need the example of putting that to work in the village setting, and we need restaurants and reading rooms in college towns more than for ourselves. So tomorrow it's really fun. It's called Finding Our Mission in His Mission. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada.